You found it. It's the real news with your host, David Knight.
That kind of sounds like a speakeasy, doesn't it? Remember, it wasn't alcohol prohibition that sent Al Capone to jail. It was the IRS that sent him to jail. We're going to be talking to Joe Bannister. He worked for years as an IRS criminal investigator, and he is the only IRS CID special agent ever to investigate allegations that the IRS illegally administers and enforces the federal income tax. So we're going to talk to him about his story, about whistleblowing and so forth, but I wanted to get him on Tax Day 2. We have him on whenever taxes are an issue, taxes are changing or whatever. And, of course, this is the time of year, as we pointed out earlier in the show. Some guy said the world's going to end on April the 23rd, I think is the date that he picked. And I said, well, this is supposedly a pastor who has read this in some codes or something in the Bible. I don't believe that for a second. However, I said, if that's true, then this would be a post-tribulation rapture because it would be happening after April the 15th. So this is a trying time for many people. It's not just the money that you have to pay, but all the paperwork that you got to go through. And Joe, thanks for joining us. You can find him at agentfortruth.com. So joining us now is Joe Bannister. Joe, when I look at this, I think about the fact that as a business, when I ran a business, it was no big deal for me to send in the sales tax information. I knew what my sales were. It didn't take me but a second to calculate sales taxes and send that in. But when I had to do my income taxes, boy, was that a problem. I had to hire an accountant. He created this book, and I had to trust that he had done everything right, and then I had to sign my name on it. And I've thought many times about the fact that Europe gets a lot more money out of their people with their stacked sales tax, that they have the value-added tax, where they keep adding sales tax at every different level of where it changes hands through production. They get a lot more money from their people than we do in terms of a percentage. But I think it's important for the U.S. government to have information about us and to have leverage over us. I think that's been a big part of the income tax system from the very beginning. I think I was talking about DARPA, about privacy, about Facebook and so forth. I think that desire to know about the American people and to be able to have leverage and control them, I think that was a big part of our income tax motivation at the very beginning. What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. I don't know if people really realize, David, how much we report on one another through 1099s and W-2s.
Yeah,
and actually
it's an interlocking directory of snitches that they've created here. You got to report on this other guy or you're in violation.
That's right. And in fact, sadly, the laws, if you actually look at the 1099 laws, for example, they really don't require the average American to file a 1099 on someone else. But like, monkeys and zoo animals, we just presume that if somebody told us that if it's over $600 a payment, we have to file a 1099. Well, if you actually look at the regulations, you find that that's not even the case. Of course, there's hundreds of pages of regulations that you have to go through to figure it out.
Yes.
But
yes.
We've done that, and you can see that it's just another scam where the IRS is expecting us to report on one another, when in fact, if we knew the law and didn't do it as often as we do, the IRS would be flying blind a lot more than it does.
And they threaten everybody with it, create this fear because the system is so complex. I forget who said it, but somebody once said, a law that is sufficiently complex is the same as having no law at all. Because somebody can come in and say, well, according to my opinion, and you can't disprove it because it's so convoluted, so complicated that it's difficult to say, well, no, that's not what the law says. Well, no, in my opinion, it does say that because it's so complicated, it gives them wiggle room to basically do whatever they wish. And when we look at financial regulations, I mean, think about the fact that we had the pedophile that was a long-serving Speaker of the House.
Dennis Hastert.
Yeah. His name escaped me for a moment there. But he didn't go to jail for being a pedophile because they create very short statute limitations on that. He went to jail because he started taking out money to pay off a guy that was blackmailing him to go public. And because he was making structured, after they questioned him about it, he didn't want to tell them what it was. And then he started making small withdrawals so that he would escape their notice. And so said, you're taking your money out of the bank, which is not laundering any money. I mean, if you're trying to put it in to try to escape detection, But when you're withdrawing the money that's already been put in the banking system and you're taking it out in small increments like that, that's what they sent him to jail for. So the financial crime system is such a complex network, and it is used to get anybody. That's why it's so dangerous with what's going on with President Trump right now, that Mueller is going in and trying to look at his financial dealings, because those laws are so pervasive and so complex. You can get anybody on anything.
Well, two things about that. First, we've discussed this before, where the money laundering laws, which include these structuring laws, which is what you're talking about. Structuring is where you take deposits or withdrawals and you structure them in a manner that will avoid the reporting requirement. And those laws, people think, oh, we really went after the drug dealers with these laws. We need to find out all these things. The fact of the matter is, it was really designed to be surveillance, an economic surveillance on the American people.
Yeah.
And as you know, the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. The government creates the problem of the drug smuggling and everything, and then they propose a solution. They tell you that we're going to surveil everyone so that we can take care of this drug problem. The drug problem's still here, but we're all being surveilled with all of our economic activity. The second thing about Dennis Hastert is I and another group of people approached him shortly after I resigned from the IRS to present these facts about the income tax and the way that it's illegally enforced. And little did we know way back in the year 2000, 2001, that he was a child molester,
Yeah.
and he was structuring payments to try to cover it all up. So obviously he wasn't too interested in learning the truth about the income tax.
Kind of interesting, he got hoisted by his own petard. The system that he supported actually wound up exposing him and sending him to jail. That's kind of interesting. Yes. Well, we look at this and we understand, how in many ways this is a trick, it's a deception and so forth. But then there's also the other aspect that if you don't want to spend your entire life fighting the IRS, you try to find a way as much as possible to be at peace with other people. What can you do at the last minute? Let's get into this a little bit, and then we got a lot of tips from you about what to do here. We'll have to continue it on the other side, but just give us some information. If you're going to be filing, what is the deadline for this year? Because 15th is going to fall on a weekend.
That's right. It's April 17th. I'm sorry, Tuesday. April 15th falls on a Sunday, and whenever the due date falls on a Saturday, a Sunday, or a legal holiday, then it's the following business day. Now, what most people outside of D.C., which is the majority of us, don't maybe realize is that Monday is Emancipation Day, and it's only celebrated, or at least it's only a federal holiday in Washington, D.C. proper. Nevertheless,
I don't feel emancipated when I got to be filing my taxes here. That's kind of an irony, isn't it?
Right. So the reason that it's Tuesday rather than Monday for the tax deadline is because of Emancipation Day being on Monday.
Wow. So we get an extra day this year. That's the emancipation, one more day. But of course, the amount of days that you have to work each year before you are keeping the money yourself, that keeps stretching further and further and further. And even though they're getting more and more revenue, reaching record revenue every time they measure it, every quarter they measure it, we still keep having record deficits because they keep spending it even faster than they bring it in. Stay with us. We got more tips for you, and we're going to be talking about his whistleblower experience when we return. Joe Bannister. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Joe Bannister. He was a criminal investigation special agent for the IRS. We're going to talk to him about some tips. Ways to keep you out of trouble. But we also want to put this in a bigger perspective. We're going to talk about what's going on with spending, with the deficit, with interest rates, because, the income taxes created at the same time they created the Federal Reserve, to service each other and so forth. And then let's talk about his particular case as a whistleblower with the IRS. And I'm not advocating that you go fight the IRS on your own and try to solve this system as a lone crusader. But we do need to collectively understand this system and what it is doing to our country and push for a change. And we need to have a different system. And we need to do this collectively. We need to fight, as G. Edward Griffin points out, we need to work collectively for our individual rights. I think that's really what needs to be done. And that means we need to understand what's going on. But let's give us a few more individual tips there, Joe. You were talking about the fact that I didn't realize we had an extra day this year because I didn't know about Emancipation Day in Washington, D.C. So we got till Tuesday to get that in. But tell us a little bit more in terms of maybe some last-minute tax tips that we got here?
Well, the the one problem, of course, is because December 31st would be the last day that anybody can really do anything about the 2017 year. This deadline coming up on Tuesday is really just filing the form or an extension because you can't get the form done by Tuesday. And of course, there is a Form 4868 where people can extend for 6 months until October 15th. And the thing that, of course, the IRS always reminds everyone that if you file an extension, it's an extension of time to file a tax return, but not an extension to pay.
Right, right. Do you think that makes any difference in terms of audits if people file an extension to delay things, or is that just something that's out there for procrastinators?
Yeah, I don't think it really increases the audit risk myself. The fact of the matter is, if you put your tax return together, haphazardly because you're so rapid, you can end up causing more problems for yourself that way. So I think it's better to take the time if you need the time. And 6 months, of course, can pass pretty quickly, but it's certainly better than if you're not ready by Tuesday.
Sure.
Another thing that people need to keep in mind is something called a mileage log. Anyone that has any kind of outside sales or any business where they're traveling, people are notorious for not getting around to keeping track of their mileage. Yet the IRS, in its graces, gives you, a deduction of 53 cents. I think it's 53.5 cents for 2017 per mile. And so what people generally do is they neglect to keep a log of their mileage, and then they get to the end of the year, they go to their tax guy or gal, and they're like, well, I didn't keep track of that. So they estimate, and they frequently estimate way too low, and they just, cheat themselves out of a larger deduction. So there's even nowadays, with everyone on their smartphones, there's even apps that you can get on your phone that you can keep track of your mileage. So most people are on their phone anyway.
Yeah.
It doesn't take but a little bit of extra effort to just log in your mileage. The thing about a mileage log is it has to be in writing. If you don't have your evidence of your mileage in writing, the IRS is not going to accept the deduction. You can deduct it, but if you ever get audited and you don't have the written proof of your mileage, they're going to disallow that in a heartbeat. So
they would disallow
really
an app then? Would they disallow an app then?
Well, of course, you'd want to download that information onto another device or a hard piece of paper so the IRS doesn't have to look at your phone to look at your mileage.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, but of course, you're not going to be given the privileges of Lois Lerner when they asked for information from the IRS. They said, we lost the stuff, we lost the records. Remember when that happened? They don't ever accept that from you as an individual, but that's the excuse that they offered when they were looking at what they were doing with the taxpayer status of conservative groups. Some of the other stuff, too.
But not us.
Yeah, some of the other stuff, too, Obamacare penalty. I think that's something that is out there. A lot of people are wondering what the status of that is right now.
Well, sadly, and I was even surprised because I didn't look at the details quite as much, but the Obamacare penalty is going away, but it didn't go away for 2017 or 2018. So
really?
The relief does not come until 2019.
Wow.
So basically 2017 has already come and gone, and therefore whether or not you had health insurance and complied with the Obamacare mandates is still going to be an issue, and you can't go back and change the past. So hopefully, most people had some kind of insurance. There are exceptions. For example, MediShare, which some of my family members are involved with, some of these health sharing ministries are one of the exceptions. If you were without health care insurance for, I think it's less than 3 consecutive months during the year, or if your earnings are so low that you don't even file a tax return under anyone's expectations. But anyway, people may not realize that 2017 and 2018, you're still having to mess with the whole Obamacare web.
Wow.
And so don't think that just because of hearing on the news that President Trump signed an executive order that all those problems go away. They're not quite. We're not quite out of the woods yet. on that.
Yeah, I think he said he sent them an order right away, and he said, "Don't pursue this or whatever." But I think they just ignore that, right? They're still going to go ahead and do it anyway.
So far, the IRS appears to be wanting to ignore, what the president directs them to do.
Yeah.
The other thing is, some people were not wanting to even give the information on the electronically filed return. And if you don't answer that question about the health, whether you had health care insurance or not, the IRS says they're going to reject your electronically filed return. So, that may be bad news for those who thought, half a year ago or a year ago, hey, I'm done with this Obamacare mess, but we're not quite out of the woods yet.
Let's talk a little bit about the things that might trigger an audit, because nobody wants to go through that. Pope said there's no hell, but because he obviously has never been through an IRS audit. But tell people how they can avoid that particular kind of purgatory.
Well, one of the things that people can get into a lot of trouble with is if they have contractors, which is, so much easier for a business owner. If you are paying a contractor, and I don't mean like a building contractor, I mean like you're paying somebody in just the simplest way, which we should all be able to engage in any time. Someone gives you a service and you pay them for that service. It's a simple contract. We have a constitutional right and a God-given right to contract with one another. But the IRS likes to turn that relationship from a contract situation into an employee-employer situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they do that is that the IRS can come down from on high, tell the business owner, hey, you see these 3 contractors that you paid money to? We're going to designate them as employees. And because we say they were employees, they should have had withholding of federal income tax and Social Security tax and Medicare tax. And so we are going to hammer you with the taxes you should have withheld and plus penalties, which is called 100% penalty. They double the taxes that you should have withheld.
Wow.
And then they add interest to that too. So they can really devastate a business owner just by arbitrarily designating that someone was an employee rather than a contractor.
What about home office expenses? Because I've always heard that was something that triggered audits. Is that your experience when you were working for the IRS?
It can, but people can also forego deductions for home office when in fact they really should go ahead and take the plunge. Just make sure that your expenses are well documented. You want to make sure that your home office area is exclusive to what your business. In other words, you don't want to have it in your bedroom. Just be
real careful that you do it right. Don't be intimidated into not doing it. Just be real careful that you dot every I and cross every T if you're going to do that. All right, when we come back, we're going to put this in a little bit of a perspective, and we're also going to talk to Joe about his experience as a whistleblower. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Joe Banister, agentfortruth.com. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Joe Banister. You can find his website, Agent for Truth. He was with the IRS as a Criminal Investigation Division Special Agent. He investigated allegations that the IRS was illegally administering and enforcing the federal income tax. We're going to talk to him about his experiences as a whistleblower. And we're going to put some of this into perspective. Before we get to that real quickly, we're going to talk a little bit about Reagan's Grace Commission findings. Joe sent this to me. Said these are 3 interesting things that came out of a report that Ronald Reagan put together that really, when we look at what's happening today in terms of spending, in terms of soaring debt, in terms of increasing interest rate, the waste that is being done, these are things that are still very important. But before we do, real quickly, I want to tell you about the products that we have on sale at InfoWarsStore.com, part of our 34-hour InfoWars special broadcast, Stop the New World War. And you can find these at InfoWarsStore.com. We've got Immune Gargle, the combo, all sizes of Immune Gargle you can get for 50% off. And again, that's our newest Super Blue product line. We have the mouthwash and we have the toothpaste. They all have nano silver in them, and so does the Immune Gargle. You can spray that in your mouth, freshen your breath, and also you can swallow it. It's nano silver, fights bacteria and virus. You can also put it on your hands to kill virus and so forth. We also have Alpha Power. It's now back in stock, 25% off. So is Bodies, back in stock and 25% off. Cell Force, 50% off. Our Alexa Pure Breeze air filter is 50% off. Very quiet, very effective, a great way to clean the air in your house because the air can get pretty dirty in a house. You can seal it up especially during winter and summer to try to heat or cool it. And even this time of year when you got pollen, it's a great thing to have the Alexa Pure Breeze filter. We have that at our house, and we really like that. And finally, Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine. You can get that 25% off. Limited supply. We may not be able to continue this because we've lost our source of Nascent Iodine, looking to find a replacement source for that. But you can get Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine right now, 25% off. And, Joe, as we were talking, I said we need to do a break as we come into this section. You said you like Nascent Iodine as well.
I certainly do. Been taking it for almost a year, and it's about down here to the bottom of the label, so I got to order some today before everybody else does.
There you go. Yeah, get the discount and get it before it goes out. That's great. Well, thanks for letting us know that. And, when you look at what's going on with the taxes, what role does the income tax play in terms of funding the federal government? Here's an interesting statistic. In March, we had a record of $210.8 billion collected. That's a record for any March that we've ever had. But then the deficit was also incredibly high, almost the same amount of money that we collected, $208.7 billion. But the interest rates are also being hiked by the federal government, not by the federal government, by the Federal Reserve, the private institution that was created at the same time we created the income taxes. So that's a big part of the problem. Talk to us a little bit about the things that Reagan's Grace Commission, the things that you sent to me about this and how those apply today.
Well, President Reagan commissioned a group of business leaders, and I mean, we're talking, billionaires, at least at the time back in the 80s. Peter Grace, who was of the candy fortune, and they all got together and they studied the federal government, how it brings in revenue, how it spends its money, as a business owner would if they were coming into a business to acquire it or keep it running or make it prosper. And so this report, I mean, it's a long report, but of course the part that I really keyed in on was the part about the income tax. And I don't know if you're going to be able to show that on the screen, but listen to this. Resistance to additional income taxes would be even more widespread if people were aware that 1/3 of all their taxes is consumed by waste and inefficiency in the federal government, as we identified in our survey. It's actually on page 14 of that document that you're showing. Another 1/3 of all their taxes escapes collection from others as the underground economy blossoms in direct proportion to tax increases and places even more pressure on law-abiding taxpayers, promoting still more underground economy, a vicious circle that must be broken. And then lastly, with 2/3 of everyone's personal income taxes wasted or not collected, 100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt and by federal government contributions to transfer payments. In other words, all individual income tax revenue are gone before one nickel is spent on the services which taxpayers expect from their government. So this is from a
basically, we're just on a big interest-only loan. And it's a loan, money that's being loaned to us by the federal government that just prints paper money, or by the Chinese government, which, after a while, they're maybe going to get tired of that and just call that loan in, like a bank would.
That's right. And what's sad is, so many people seem so worried about the government, like, how will the government survive? And I think that this report is one example of how experts looked at the situation and see that if the government needed our money so bad, they wouldn't be wasting it the way they do. And so we all chase our tails every year, go through this tax issue, all these obligations, and find that this is what they're doing with our money. Now, that's not a reason not to pay the income tax, because of course that can't be used as a defense, but it certainly can be a motivating factor for the American people to stop feeling sorry for the government and start feeling sorry for all of us who, sweat and work and try to provide for our families and make our country better. And we've got this ball and chain of an income tax that is doing nothing for us, nothing to benefit the country or us.
And that's point number 2 is why they're so paranoid about cryptocurrencies, because they, as you pointed out earlier, they've got this interlocking web of informants, everybody informing on everybody else. Because you're part of that banking system there, people escape the banking system. If people escape the fiat currencies of the central banks and the central banks who can raise interest as they're doing on us right now, even though we have record tax receipts, we have spending that is going crazy, and we've got rapidly escalating interest rates. All this looks very bad. You know, when you're talking about waste, one of the things I saw today that really hit home, $1 million study to study 3-year-old transgenders. I mean, this is the way your government is spending money. It's absolutely amazing that we see this kind of stuff. But talk to us a little bit in the time we got left. Talk to us a little bit about what you blew the whistle on when you looked at the illegally administered income tax.
Well, I put on my website, you know, because obviously there's so little time to devote to these matters. People need to do their homework after the fact. But if they go to agentfortruth.com, in the Learn More section, I've got a section called What's This All About? And there I try to make it as concise as possible with links to documents so that people can, you know, take a little time. It really wouldn't take long, maybe a half hour or an hour, where people can learn what's this all about? Why is Joe Banister screaming about the income tax all the time? You know, what have we done in the past to try to expose this issue? Does Joe Banister have any credibility? Do the people in the tax movement have any credibility? Of course, InfoWars, Alex, yourself, you've been really helpful to open the eyes of the American people to so many, you know, corrupt practices that the federal government has. To me, the income tax is at the core, the income tax and the Federal Reserve System, because those are the levers of control that you know, the powers that be have over the American people. And they're also levers that really do control us and make it difficult to, you know, squirm out of this straitjacket that they have us in. But as you said earlier, David, there, you know, we always have to have hope. We always have to work towards justice and getting rid of these corrupt practices, these chains that are on us. We can't give up. It's a tall order. And as you said, you know, I don't advocate people one-on-one taking on the IRS because, you know, fighting the 800-pound gorilla alone generally doesn't turn out too well. But
we're not going to win because they've got their court, so they're basically going to, if you got a legal point, they're just not going to, well, we're not going to listen to that. I mean, we've seen that with the Bundy trial. Say, well, we're not going to let you bring a witness in. We're not going to let you know about the criminal actions of these people that were in separate trials were prosecuting. You know, same thing happened in the Silk Road case with Ross Ulbricht. So they'll railroad you in these courts. You're not going to be able to get a fair hearing there. But I think the real issue here is for people to take a look at what you've got there at Agent for Truth, to understand, take the time to understand that, just like we can't tell everybody what Ed Snowden revealed in a short period of time. We need to audit the Fed. We need to audit the IRS, you know, the way they administer the tax code and so forth. And people need to care about their liberty, or we're never going to do this. So we've got to do this collectively as a group. We're not going to be able to stand up one-on-one to this system. We can try to work within it, but we have to understand it and we have to change it. And a key part of that is going to agentfortruth.com. Thank you so much for joining us, Joe. And that concludes this part of our 34-hour broadcast. Alex Jones is coming up next. Stay with us.
Introducing Cellforce by InfoWars Life. Cellforce focuses on mitochondria efficiency and protection. Mitochondria produce over 95% of your energy. They are your body's cellular engines. Cellforce helps promote your cellular energy production by supporting mitochondria, much like a cellular engine overhaul. Because when your mitochondria don't run at 100% efficiency, then they start producing reactive oxygen species. Top scientists agree that aging is most likely caused by cellular damage, resulting from these reactive oxygen species. The antioxidants found in Cellforce are some of the most powerful available on the market. The stronger the antioxidant, the better its ability to scavenge for these reactive oxygen species and other free radicals. Boost, protect, and adapt with Cellforce from InfoWars Life. Head to InfoWarsLife.com or call 1-888-253-3139.